In this week's show, we continue our series on how to full-time RV with a look at motorized RVs. Hi kids, real quick before we get this thing going, I just want to do a quick shout out. We didn't have a ton of B-roll for this video, so I reached out to Mike and Shelly K. Confer over at Camping with the Confers. They were nice enough to allow us to grab some of the B-roll from some rig reviews that they did. So when you get done watching this, just head on over to Camping with the Confers and check them out. Thank you again, Mike and Shelly K. Tony Town needs her microphone. Ooh, it hooks on the brassiere. In the production world, we refer to that as the sound cave. Welcome to the channel. I'm Mike.
I'm Tony.
And this is our RV Sunsets. This is Gracie, the adventure dog. We are in our 50s couple.
Damn near close to 60.
Me, I am. Okay. Not you, I am. And we have been full-timing for going on 3 years now. Welcome to our series on how to full-time RV. This week, we are going to be talking about rigs, and specifically, what kind of rigs?
Motorized.
Motorized rigs. So the intention of this video is to introduce you to the different types of motorized RVs that are out there for full-time RVing. We're going to go through the different classes of motorized RVs. We're going to talk about the pros and the cons, and then we're going to wrap this thing up with a little bit of just kind of general pros and cons of motorized RVs versus towable RVs. We're going to be speaking in generalities. Of course, there's going to be exceptions to some of the things that we say. And if there's one thing that I am absolutely certain about, because this is the internets, those people out there that have an exception to something we say, they're going to mention it.
We'll disagree strongly with
you. They will disagree strongly. So if you're one of those people, feel free actually to put your disagreement in the comments below. We don't claim to be experts. We could be wrong on some of this stuff. And if anything, it'll get a conversation going about it.
Just do it nicely.
Yeah. Please.
My feelings get hurt really easy.
Yeah, there was a lady one time that commented something about you chewing gum.
Yeah, while I was talking.
She still hasn't given that one up.
I bring it up all the time.
All right.
I'm a sensitive soul.
All right, so let's do this. The first class of motorized RV that we are going to talk about is the Class B. I have a jingle for adventure vans. You want to hear it?
No.
If hiking and biking is in your plans, you better get yourself
an adventure van.
Tony hates it when I do jingles. So Class Bs are these small van type of RVs. There's also some B pluses, which are a little bit bigger, but they're essentially the pros and cons are the same.
Does anybody else out there sing, "It's an adventure van," when we see an adventure van on the road? All the time.
You do that all the time. Okay, so the pros of the adventure van Class B type of motorized RV. The biggest pro that you're going to get is mobility. These things are small. They can get in and out of anywhere. If you want to hang out in a parking lot by the beach, if you want to be able to park anywhere in a national park, perfect RV for that.
You can even camp in tent spots because you're just parking.
Pretty much, yeah. I hadn't even thought about that.
Yeah. I'm the smart one.
These rigs are also not extremely tall, so you don't have to worry about low clearances, low bridges, low trees in national parks, things like that. These rigs are also subject to all normal federal safety standards for automobiles, so they can be a little bit safer. On that side, you'll have things like airbags.
I have another pro that you didn't even think about.
Okay, go.
If you're a single traveler by yourself, this is almost the perfect vehicle for you because you can just handle everything with this small rig.
Absolutely.
Right.
Okay, cons. I'm going to let you do the cons.
One of the bigger cons for, like multiple people like us is space is very limited. Your bathroom isn't going to be a bathroom. It's going to probably be a wet shower if you even have that. For full-time family, for full-time living, it can be hard.
I would agree with every one of that. If you're a family, a Class B is not going to be the rig for you. Can you imagine having like 2 or 3 small kids and yourself?
Well, growing up, my dad had a van and we used to fight over who sat where, and I can't imagine living in one.
Right. Let's move on to the next class, which is the Class C. That way.
I don't know.
That way.
Okay.
These are a step up from Class Bs. A lot of these are built on the Ford E-Series chassis. Think of it kind of like a van in the front and then an RV in the back. Most of them, or actually all of them, have sleeping areas or storage areas above the cab. All right. Let's move on to the pros. The pros for a Class C, you're going to have more living space than you would in a Class B. So it's a little bit better suited for multiple people or families that are full-timing. They're going to have more maneuverability than a Class A. So they're going to be considerably easier to drive than a big Class A type RV.
These are what you mostly see people that rent RVs. This is the type that they rent because it's kind of fairly easy for setup and tear down. It's not that big, so it's not that scary to drive.
These are also going to be shorter. They're not going to be as tall as your bigger Class A rigs. So again, there's less issues with low clearance. There's less issues with overhanging trees in state and national parks. And they are generally less expensive than your bigger Class A rigs. And then lastly, you are more likely to have some safety features in these Class Cs. Since that front cab is like a van, you're probably going to have airbags in it, things like that. So it could be a little bit safer than your Class A, at least for the people sitting in the front seats. How about cons? Let's move on to those.
Again, less storage space, no big window out the front. So if you look at the big rigs, they have this like huge window. This one's more like a truck window, so you know your visibility is a little hampered there. The driving area isn't usually part of the living space.
Yeah, you can't normally turn the seats, the driver and passenger seat, around in Class Cs and have it become part of the living space. That you can do that with the larger Class As.
It often, from what I witness, it becomes part of your storage.
Oh, yeah. When you're parked.
I see people put their clothes, hampers, everything up there. I also see a lot of dogs just sitting in the seat looking out the front window. And because the engine is out front, it tends to be a little noisier.
Yeah, front engine rigs are going to be a bit noisier. All right, so let's move on to the big boys, the Class A's. Class A's are these bus-like looking RVs that you see out there. The gas-powered ones tend to have the engine in the front, and the diesel-powered ones tend to have the engine in the back, hence the term diesel pusher. Let's talk about pros. These are generally more roomy than the other classes of motorized RVs. Many of them have opposing slides, so your living space will get nice and big. And these Class A's, the driving space can most times become part of the living space. The chairs that the driver and passenger sit in will be able to rotate back and become part of the living area. There's also going to be more storage space on these Class A rigs, especially the ones that have full pass-throughs in the bottom storage. Those have tons and tons of storage.
They tend to have a giant window out front, which is so much better for visibility. Also, people have reported that it's much better for people that tend to get car sick and stuff like that. And
they're also going to sit higher up, which will give you a little better visibility farther down the road, which is a safety benefit.
Sometimes it gives you visibility into people's cars, which is not a benefit.
There's some stories there, I'm sure. These larger rigs also tend to have more luxury amenities. They're going to have things like larger bathrooms on some of the diesel pushers because they're diesel and they can take so much more weight. You might have fully tiled bathrooms in there. You'll also get washers and dryers, bigger kitchens. Yeah, they're just
refrigerators.
Bigger refrigerators. They're just have more luxury amenities to them. And if you go with a diesel pusher, you're going to have the engine in the back of the rig, so it's going to be considerably quieter up in the front part when you're driving down the road. All right, cons. What are the cons?
They will be taller, which can really limit you. Taller and longer, which can limit your spaces in a lot of RV parks and a lot of national parks.
And you can get shorter Class A's But like Tony said, the longer ones, the 40 footers and over, it's going to limit you on RV sites and national parks, state parks, and even in like commercial RV parks.
Generally more expensive.
Yeah, especially the diesel pushers. You're going to find that these are, you know, $200,000 rigs and up.
Why you can use these to tow. Oftentimes, if you're towing another vehicle, you cannot back up. So you have to be very careful with your planning because you don't want to get into a situation where you have to unhook a car and then hook the tow back up because you just cannot back up with a tow. That's going to be the controversial one right there.
What about engine placement on these things?
The engine placement can make it difficult to work on if you're so inclined or so capable.
And it's also going to limit, like there's a lot of shops that won't take a Class A in to work on it just because that engine is difficult to access. All right, that's Class A's. Let's move on to the Class Super C's. Think of these as like a semi-truck that has a motorhome body put onto the back of it. One of the things that these Super Cs are all about is heavy towing capabilities. So think about having the ability to tow a stacker trailer, which may have, you know, your race car in it or your classic car in it, or if you're a desert rat type of person, is going to have your side-by-sides or your dune buggies, your quads, things like that. They have huge towing capacities on some of these. Okay, so let's talk about the pros of the Super Cs. I kind of already mentioned the heavier towing capacity. If you want to tow big loadouts, the Super C is going to be your rig. The engine placement on the Super C, since it's in front like a normal semi-truck, it's going to be much easier to access the engine, to work on it. You'll find you have less problems with shops that are willing to work on a Super C. Also, having that engine out in front of you, in my opinion, adds a bit of safety to driving these rigs if you wind up in a front-end collision. With the Super C, you have a giant chunk of steel sitting out in front of you that you don't have on a Class A. All right, what about cons of these Super Cs?
It's going to cost you an arm and a leg. And another leg.
And another leg. These things are expensive. Super Cs you're looking at a minimum of $250,000. When you get to the more quality builds on these, you're looking over $300,000 for rigs like these.
You don't have the big window up front like the Class A's?
In general, many of them, the driving area cannot become part of the living space.
And again, the engine's up front, so you're going to hear that engine noise more.
Next, we want to talk a bit about just some general pros and cons between motorized RVs and towable RVs. So first, motorized pros. These rigs are more self-contained. What I mean by that is most of them, well, just about all of them, are going to have an onboard generator. So if you're the type that likes to boondock, it's going to be much easier to just park it, hit a button, fire up the generator, away you go.
Easier setup and tear down. I mean, I've seen people just pull into a spot, hit a button, and they're done.
Yeah, and the easier setup and tear down may be a consideration for you if you have limited mobility. For example, if we want to hook up a generator, I got to get up and down out of the back of my truck, get the portable generator out, hook all that stuff up. Much easier just to push a button.
The other one is you do have access to the entire rig during motion.
Yeah, during travel, you can access the whole rig.
You're not supposed to.
Yeah, you're supposed to.
But like say your spouse has to go to the bathroom and you don't want to pull over. She can get up and pop into the bathroom.
All right, what about cons of motorized RVs?
Number one, more expensive. If you're looking to get into this lifestyle and you go that route, you're going to spend a lot of money.
Yeah, if you look at a motorized RV compared to a comparable towable, the motorized is obviously going to be more expensive because you have a powertrain underneath it. Unless you are in a Class B, you're most likely going to want to have what's called a towed. It's basically a vehicle that you can flat tow or trailer tow behind your rig. This means that you now have two powertrains to deal with. You have two oil changes you have to do. You have, you know, all of that stuff. So that can be an additional expense. If you need to have work done on your motorized rig, and it can be something as simple as an oil change, you have to put your whole house into the shop.
Your whole house goes, which means probably the added expense of either an Airbnb or a hotel while it's being fixed.
In general, there are no federal safety standards on motorhomes. This is especially true of the larger Class A's. This means that, in my opinion, they can be a less safe rig in a crash. And again, this is especially true for the large Class A's. Another general con of motorized is they can feel a little more cave-like. You're not going to get like giant tall ceilings that you would get in like a fifth wheel. So it's going to feel, in my opinion, a little less residential. Okay, so we also want to talk about what are kind of the generally accepted quality brands in motorized rigs. Mass manufactured motorized rigs. I'm not talking Newells and Prevos, which are, you know, $1 million.
That's a whole other thing.
That's a whole other world.
Which we have no experience in.
Most people don't have experience in.
Because we are white trash.
I don't know for white trash, but we ain't got enough money for a Newell, that's for
right?
sure. The general consensus is the two brands that are kind of at the top with motorized RVs are going to be Tiffin's and Newmars. This doesn't mean that everything else is junk. I mean, you're actually not going to be able to find all of these classes of vehicles within those two brands. The best takeaway is just do your research. If you're looking for a rig, get on the old internets and do some hunting around and see if you can find past people's experience with the rig that you're looking at. So lastly, we're going to talk about which class of motorized RV each one of us would buy. But first, before we tell you that, I just want to ask you that if you got something out of this video, if you could please subscribe, hit the like button. If you want to see more of our How to Full-Time RV series, you can click on the bell icon. That will give you a notification each time we release a video. All right, Tony Tao, if you had to buy a class or any class of motorized RV today, money's no object.
Money's no object.
What class of motorized RV would you buy?
Probably Super C.
And why?
Safety, power, I can tow things.
And if it was me and money was no object, I would buy this Newell rig that we saw in Spearfish Canyon.
With the Lamborghini.
With the stacker trailer that had the Lamborghini in it. No, I'm kidding. I would actually be with Tony. I would buy a Super C. I just love the looks of them. In a former life, I was a truck driver, so I feel comfortable in something like that. So yeah, for me, it would be a Super C with a Jeep towed behind. All right, so we will see you next week where we are going to be talking about towable vehicles. Say good night.
Good night.
Good night.